Welcome back, folks. I'm John Avi Sosha, and this is Further Study Family Law, where we are exploring the laws that shape families one topic at a time. Now, imagine this. You and your partner have been together for over 15 years. You share a dog, a house, a car, a bank account, and even a Costco membership, but you aren't married. Then, one day, it's over. Life happens. Suddenly, you have all kinds of questions. Does the dog belong to them? Is your car yours, or do you need to start leasing? Will you ever buy a $1.50 Costco hot dog again? Can someone who is never legally married still have legal property rights after a breakup? Today, we are covering special relationship statuses and committed intimate relationships, or CIRs for short, where love and the law collide in modern and messy ways. Now, remember, legal circumstances change from case to case and state to state. Nowhere is this more true than with CIRs. Remember, this series is meant for general education purposes to help viewers understand some basic legal concepts. Folks, I've said it a million times, and I'll say it a million more. Never, ever get legal advice from a YouTube video. Still, we think this deserves further study. The first thing I want to clear up as we head into this episode is the distinction between CIRs and common law marriages, a concept we touched on briefly earlier this season. They are not the same thing, though they serve similar societal roles. Common law marriages are legally recognized marriages where a couple lives together, presents themselves as married to others, all without a formal ceremony or marriage license. It can be treated as a marriage just like any other. See our marriage episode for details. That said, you should know that common law marriages are recognized by only a few states. Every state that does recognize common law marriages has different standards for assessing their existence and the privileges and duties the status bestows, but while the standards aren't identical, the purposes of these tests rhyme across jurisdictions. The courts and government often recognize that life is messy and that society needs a way to recognize long-term relationships, even if the couple in question never sees the inside of a courthouse. This is particularly true in more rural communities, where historically, things have been done on a close-knit but legally informal basis. Sometimes, the community recognizes a union before the law does, and it is in the interest of justice and order for the law to back down and yield to functional reality in some circumstances. I want to stress that both CIRs and common law marriages are generally distinct from civil unions, which is a civil status sometimes bestowed by some states. Washington is not among the states that recognizes common law marriages, but we, along with other states like us, have an analogous concept that serves a similar functional purpose, CIRs, or committed intimate relationships. Washington CIRs are deemed to exist when an unmarried couple lives together for a significant period of time and live in what can be considered a marriage-like relationship. If the standards defined as CIR sound squishy and vague to you, you would be correct. This is a highly fact-specific examination that has few hard rules. And for good reason. CIRs and other analogs like them are by design flexible creatures. Not every CIR looks the same, but if found to exist, they carry commonalities. Here are some factors the court might consider in determining if your relationship qualifies as a CIR. I cannot stress enough how fact-specific CIR investigations are. Maybe you lived together for 10 years, but never merged bank accounts. But you did put each other on your wills, but you didn't buy property together. But you weren't on each other's taxes either. Would this be a CIR? I don't know. My team would have to go in and get a picture of your entire relationship to gauge the facts, review the timeline, and most importantly, infer the intent of the parties involved. This is why it's so difficult to find specific guidance online about CIRs. It isn't one size fits all. It can't be. Well, I hear you asking, that's all well and good, John, but what does having a CIR mean? It means that after a breakup, you might be responsible for dividing household assets and property acquired during your relationship. This is similar to a divorce where the court will look to make an equitable division of your assets and debts. Here in Washington, CIRs are usually recognized around the 2 to 3 year mark. But in that case, are CIRs just a marriage but with extra steps? Well, also no. Here in Washington, there are 3 big differences between CIR separations and divorces. Unlike a divorce, no one will ever be required to pay alimony or lifestyle support to the other, no matter the circumstances. Further, separate property you bring into the relationship and all accrual of value of that separate property generally stays with the parties as their separate property. And additionally, you are forbidden by law from recouping your attorney's fees from your ex, an admittedly rare possibility that is seldom available to married couples, but still, this bears mentioning. What this means is if you're in a long-term, heavily intermingled cohabitating but unmarried relationship, you may still want to talk to an attorney if you are considering leaving or if you were recently broken up with. If you separate under the right fact pattern, some states may make a partner responsible for dividing your household quasi-community property if your lives are sufficiently intermingled. Rather than arguing about asset division, in our practice, we usually see the bulk of a client's energy devoted to refuting or proving the mere existence of a CIR. It's kind of like the what are we conversation couples have 3 months into a relationship, except this one is way more emotionally intense and it decides if you get 50% of your home equity. To make matters even more confusing, everything I have shared with you is distinct from the civil unions I mentioned earlier, an intermediary civil status made available by some states to cohabitating couples. Civil unions were heavily used by same-sex couples before marriage was federally legalized in the US back in 2015. The purpose of a civil union was often to sort of replicate the functional utility of marriage in places where it was frowned upon or banned outright. Recently, civil unions have fallen out of favor for the simple reason that most people would prefer to be married. To recap, the difference between the 3 are as follows. Common law marriages are actual marriages that have been formed by cohabitation and various conduct. If recognized, they bestow marital rights and responsibilities you might expect in a normal spousal marriage. Asset division, alimony, taking out the garbage every Tuesday, etc. A CIR, and other analogs like them, are not generally marriages per se, but rather legal frameworks to measure commitments and then divide assets, debts, and obligations at the end of relationships that qualify. They are not actual marriages. Civil unions are intermediary statuses used as a stopgap by states who wanted to expand civil cohabitation rights for couples who may not be eligible for full traditional marriage. Even when they are still used, civil unions are often not federally recognized. Taken together, it's actually pretty cool how hard some jurisdictions have worked to recognize and enable relationships of all shades and stripes, even ones who may not fit in traditional concepts of marriage. Who says jurisprudence can't be romantic? I always recommend speaking to an attorney about your specific issues, but that's especially true for CIRs. Special relationship law is a patchwork of standards and norms across the country. While this episode tries to give you a broad overview that rhymes with the truth in most jurisdictions, we had to greatly oversimplify a lot of areas to get our point across in a concise manner. Sing it with me now. Don't get legal advice from YouTube. CIRs and other special relationships are a lot more common than you think. In our modern world, traditional marriage and domestic relations are only getting more complicated. Yet, most people know little about the alternatives. Being able to recognize the gray areas in the legal system gives unmarried partners who are still in long-term relationships a measure of legal protection, especially in the unfortunate cases where those relationships end. CIRs aren't a loophole. They're an important legal recognition of the different ways that we form and maintain relationships. At the end of the day, love isn't always about having a marriage license. It's about sharing your life with another person, caring for each other, building a family, and choosing to go to Costco on a Sunday afternoon, even though you know it's going to be insanely busy because your partner needs toilet paper and Costco has the only good brand. That's how you truly know you're in a committed, intimate relationship. In our next episode, we'll dive into some common problems with the family law system. I'll see you next week. Thanks for watching this episode of Further Study, which was filmed at our studio in Toronto, Canada. Support Further Study on Patreon to keep our content free for anyone who wants to learn.